Welcome to this afternoon. I have in front of me Jonathan Neufeld, who's working at Tecterra, just did a sparkling presentation on what Tecterra does, what it's doing for Alberta, and what it's doing for the various firms that you've been serving. But I'm very interested in the beginning, Jonathan, of how you found yourself into the world of spatial analytics.
For sure, yeah. I've been in this world of geospatial analytics and geospatial knowledge now my entire career. And for me, it really came out of a love of maps and a love of understanding how things connect in the real world. And I just had a desire to take that to another place and to see, where that would really go in the digital age.
So you found a way to actually remain involved in what you found as a recreational pursuit and actually get into a career where, as you weren't touching reality, you were touching an algorithm of reality or an analog of reality.
Absolutely.
You deal with the numbers.
That's right. Yeah, and then you can take that to a higher level and not just look at the hiking trail or the mountain that you're on, but the province and the country that you're in and see how things connect there.
Or the forest, or the forest fires, or whatever we want to count.
That's right. Yeah.
So you're in the counting business.
Well, we're in the spatial business.
Well, you translate it. I mean, you're taking a digital form of 0 or 1 in large numbers and putting them together to replicate or visualize.
To model in a lot of cases.
Something real, whether it be
absolutely.
a process or a product. Incredible. If you, in 8th grade, did you have any idea whatsoever you were going to be working in this field?
Not a clue.
Do you think the field even exists when you were trying to make that first decision? What am I going to be when I grow up?
I think I was still deciding between fireman and Superman at that point. I think it was probably really embryonic. It was in the beginning stages, and geomatics is a relatively new term, and yet mapping and spatial position has been around forever. And so the place we find ourselves now is incredible, and it definitely wasn't there when I was in 8th grade.
So what skill set do you bring to Tecterra?
I've got a background as an engineer, so I'm trained as a geomatics engineer.
Okay.
I tend to bring a fairly technical technology focus, and I'm broadening my horizons now and looking more into business application of that technology.
So what's your title?
I'm the Director of Commercialization Programs.
So does that mean you've got to have good relational skills?
I do a lot of talking to people.
Right.
Yeah.
So here
absolutely.
we are. You're dealing with numbers. You've got a passion for the environment. It sounded like an outdoors and recreation. You've brought a whole realm of communication assets to the table. You're skilled in speaking. You probably write well. You know how to do a PowerPoint presentation. You're not afraid to get in front of an audience.
No.
That's a hell of a
Thank you.
I meet a lot of students who think all I need to do is know something.
Right.
You need to know how to convey it.
Yeah.
And that knowing is enough. And you're sort of an illustration that knowledge without relationships has no value.
I think that's very true, and I think that applies in a lot of ways. So at Tecterra, one of the things we focus on is networking facilitation. We want people to come together at much like conferences like this one, and they can meet and they can figure out where they have commonalities, where they have overlaps, and how they can really work together. And the same is true of spatial data. If you bring it together and if you find ways that it overlaps, you can really extract a lot more meaning.
Well, that touches on an interesting phenomenon. I know I asked you earlier, is there any resistance to the adoption of analytics as an aid for decision making? And you were a little uncertain where I was going. Well, I'll give you an example. Tom Grabowski, who works for Silvacom and has developed an incredible firm that has enormous amounts of information about our forests and our environment, was saying to me one day that departments often in government are reluctant to share data.
Within government, you mean?
Within, sometimes even between departments or even within a department.
Right.
And I'm not picking on government alone. It's obviously an indication that some people feel they own data, that it's proprietary and must be protected. And yet they're undermining the value of that data when they're reluctant to look at that data in relation to other data.
Absolutely.
So we're dealing with a human issue.
Well, the traditional model has been that data is power, and whoever has the most information has the most power, right? And I think we're seeing a shift now where data and information is much more readily available. I'll give you an example. We're running a special initiative around avalanche forecasting through Tecterra to help the Canadian Avalanche Association bring better tools to that industry for analytics. And at one of their recent conferences, I was talking with a gentleman from Utah. He said they've recently opened up crowdsourcing of avalanche information. And to date, the avalanche information has been a very specialized field with very highly trained personnel. And there's been a large amount of uncertainty about opening it up because they're afraid they'll get poor reports or misinformation. And he said after one season, bar none, this is the best source of information they've ever found. And so really the power and the fear is changing. If organizations can accept that open data is the way to go, I think that will really enable them to do more with it, and I think they'll succeed through that.
Here's another oxymoron. I mean, there are so many elements here of what looks like a pathway to the future, and then you find all these potholes along the way. Is in our program, and we do this every year, we invite people of influence to send us greetings. Well, we've got 2 letters in here. One is from Stephen Harper, and the other one's from Alison Redford, and both of them are saying open data.
Right.
Both of them seem to recognize the relevance of open data as an economic and a social instrument in order to aid, maybe even automate decision making.
Right.
And yet we hear that while the kings and the queens of today and those of influence, they say this is where we want to go, and even Obama has declared in the U.S. it's a fundamental strategy. It's a management tool. I don't know how we've been making decisions in the past, and yet having said it, and then watching the behavior sometimes of the individuals in their own organizations reluctant to look at adopting a tool.
Right.
So change management is a fundamental, or
it's a fundamental human issue.
And a major part of this whole transition.
And I think there's a big transition too from saying we're going to go forward with this open data policy. And I would imagine certainly at a federal government level, they need to be very careful with how they implement it and the sort of things they set up. I don't know, obviously, but I would imagine it's a very fundamental shift for a lot of civil servants.
Well, I think like any technology, and some of us think of analytics as a technology or of the processes by which we derive data as a technology. Anytime you bring a technology to the fore, it's going to have an impact because it implies or brings about doing something differently. I mean, imagine the day when the printing press, or even more significant, the wheel.
Right.
I mean, I'm not dragging things around anymore, honey. What the hell is the neighbor doing with that wheel over there? Or the printing press, when the nobles said, no way am I allowing that printing press into my community.
Right.
I like everyone to remain ignorant so I can have that position of power.
Absolutely.
But now that data is so readily transmitted, the relationship between those in power and those who want it is shifting.
Absolutely.
It seems to me that is a revolution. It could be another renaissance.
And I think analytics has a big part to play there because as a society we generate a lot more data now. We're tweeting everything, we're video streaming everything, and so we're generating a lot of data. But now we need to pull out the information from that data, and I think that's a critical piece.
Well, and even having pulled it out, you still, if by that you mean using it.
Absolutely, yeah. Taking the raw numbers and bringing it to a point where you can make a decision based on it.
So again, it's like the tree falling in the forest and no one hearing it. If no one is going to use that data, it's valueless.
Right.
It's only when the human being begins to apply it.
Right.
So if I, as an organization, am a CEO and I've been running a machine shop for years, and now you tell me, you are the holder of our data, please help release it into our organization. That CIO is no longer presiding over a machine shop, he's a change agent.
He is, absolutely.
So CIO Association, it's one of our sponsors, was chosen for exactly that reason. We figure they're probably sweating bullets through this thing. Because they got somebody on top saying, open up your data, someone at the bottom that's got it all, and a whole bunch of people in the middle saying, I'm not quite so sure.
Or I don't know what to do with this, I don't know where to go. Right, yeah, and I think, IT certainly plays a large role in this, and they're on the forefront of opening up those doors and creating the technological access.
Is it a push or a pull?
I'm not sure. I would imagine it's a little bit of both. I would say half the world is trying to pull the data and half is trying to push it. And, I would imagine there's some in both camps.
Geospatial, which is really where you're at. I'm going to ask you specific about your own industry. Are you guys pushing something into society, or is there an appetite out there already trying to pull it?
Well, I mean, at Tecterra, we're supporting technology development and supporting technology innovation. So we're not, ourselves, we're not developing those tools.
We're trying to
helping
develop an ecosystem
to
enable
to support that ecosystem and help them develop. And the things that we're seeing are really coming from both. We've seen some applications where it's very clear, a large, typically resource company has come to a small firm and said, I need a solution around this, right? And they said, great, here you go. Here's a spatial way to manage that data. And in other cases, we have a lot of innovators working with mobile devices or web-based systems that are saying, this is the future, and here's where we're going, right? And so we're seeing that in both cases.
So as I sit here, I listen to you, and I see the respect that you have for environment from almost your genetics on through your own career. Sometimes people just get lucky. I understand environmental monitoring in Alberta is becoming increasingly relevant, one, to get our image sorted out and to do a better job
Absolutely.
in managing our environment.
Yeah.
Sounds like Tecterra is sitting right smack in the middle of the road.
Yes, we see that kind of environmental monitoring as a really critical place for geomatics. Everything has a position, and certainly how things relate spatially and how things are monitored remotely, it's right in the wheelhouse of geomatics. And so we're looking to play a big role in helping develop that system and helping the province of Alberta really implement a world-class environmental monitoring system.
You obviously see a lot of entrepreneurs that have picked up on the thrust and have come to you as a guide to help them make profit and add value to and expedite and improve decision making in that whole realm.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how we ever got things done before we had data.
Yeah, and soon we'll have a generation who is grown up on data and will have not known any difference. Right?
Well, I think we've got a whole generation that have been carrying iPads and Blackberries. They're challenging their teachers in the classroom today as to whether or not the teacher can hold a candle to what they can at least get access to. We used to tell them, use your library.
Yeah.
Know your reference source. Know where to go.
Know how to use the card catalog.
You don't have to memorize everything.
Yeah.
Well, now they've
taken it to heart.
They've drank the formula. They're doing, and now the very people with the power that said do it are a little unsure whether they should bring that BlackBerry or iPad into the classroom.
Well, it certainly changes the model, doesn't it? Because now it's much more of a collaboration, and it's much more about facilitating the learning rather than, I'm the one with the knowledge and you're the one receiving it.
Isn't that astounding? I mean, that those that had the knowledge associated with the learning processes are now the ones that are maybe the most reluctant to allow the iPad and the BlackBerry into their classroom because it challenges the position of authority that they once had. They knew, and the student was like a client in Roman times was one step above a slave.
Right.
Nobody's a slave anymore.
Right. I don't know. I don't have a large view into our education system.
You have a kid? You have any children?
I have a young kid. Yeah, he just is turning 2 in the fall.
Oh, so we got 3 more years.
We're a little ways away from that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he'll go in as a rebel. I can feel
He's learning how to work YouTube already.
Well, I've got I think he's 7 months old now, so I've got a little, he's just learning to walk, and I think whether he's walking, crawling, or what do they do when they rib their way across the floor? We'll find
just
out.
Scooting along.
Scooting, that's the word. You've been through it. How many children do you have?
I've got 2. So our son is 19 months, turning 20 months here, and our daughter is 5 months old.
Are they using abacus in the cribber at all?
Well, we're teaching them how to count with blocks and cars and so on, and trying to kind of manage the amount of digital interaction they have.
Some years ago, and we'll wrap this up in a minute, some years ago when I was Assistant Deputy Minister within the Alberta government, and anointed to be a change agent, I guess. I think that was my role, although you didn't get a label or a title.
Right.
I think people generally knew my role, and Auditor General came over to my office at one time and asked, what are you doing? Well, I was obviously creating some chaos. And my answer was, I'm teaching a department to count. And I think that's what made me probably a reasonably good manager. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Perry. Great to be here.
It's very, very informative. I'm glad to know more about Tecterra, and you and I will chat again many times.
I look forward to it.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Join the conversation next year as more cities become data-driven. Become a community partner. Contact us at info@abctech.ca.